Welcome to Skytech-Lens, July 26, 2025, a date that will be remembered as the day economic tensions between the United States and Europe erupted into a full-scale trade war, sending shockwaves through global markets and boardrooms alike. The US and EU are now locked in a bitter trade war, with $66 billion in American exports suddenly blocked by Europe in retaliation for sweeping new US tariffs. The once strong economic partnership is now strained to its breaking point as both sides dig in. The Trump administration has raised tariffs to 15% on a wide range of European imports, and is threatening to double down with a 30% tariff on even more goods if a deal isn't reached by August. The message is clear: the US is prepared for escalation. The EU responded swiftly, imposing its own 30% tariffs on over $100 billion worth of US products. The targets are unmistakable: American industrial giants from aircraft and vehicles to machinery, chemicals, and agricultural exports are all in the crosshairs. For US businesses, this is far more than a policy dispute. It's an economic war that threatens to unravel decades of transatlantic commerce, partnerships, and trust built over generations. The US claims its tariffs are necessary to protect American jobs and industries from unfair competition. The EU, however, calls these measures protectionist and illegal, activating its new anti-coercion instrument to prepare for even broader countermeasures. The immediate impact is severe. US companies now face a staggering $66 billion annual loss in industrial revenue. The automotive and aviation sectors, already under pressure, are hit the hardest, with layoffs and production cuts looming. This is not just a numbers game, it's a clash of economic philosophies and national interests, with both sides refusing to back down. Negotiations are tense, and the prospect of a quick resolution seems distant. As the standoff intensifies, the world watches anxiously. How deep will the wounds go, and how long will it take for the global economy to recover from this unprecedented transatlantic rift? The trade war's shockwaves are slamming into America's industrial heartlands, Detroit and Seattle. Once symbols of American innovation and economic might, these cities now find themselves on the front lines of a global economic conflict that threatens their very foundations. Boeing faces $10 billion in EU tariffs on aircraft components, threatening a wave of cancellations from European airlines and putting its entire supply chain at risk. The company's future contracts are in jeopardy, and suppliers across the country are bracing for a sharp downturn in business. Every part, from Kansas aluminum to Arizona avionics, is now caught in the crossfire, endangering thousands of American jobs. The ripple effects extend far beyond Boeing, threatening local economies and small businesses that depend on aerospace contracts. Detroit's automakers, Ford and GM, are bracing for a 25% EU tax on US-made cars, set to wipe out up to 20% of US auto exports, and $10 billion annual loss. This could force layoffs, plant closures, and a painful restructuring of the American auto industry. Already struggling with the EV transition, US carmakers now face margin-crushing tariffs and new EU carbon regulations, making their vehicles uncompetitive. The pressure is mounting as inventories pile up and profits shrink, leaving little room for error. European rivals like Volkswagen and BMW, shielded from these costs, are poised to seize market share as American companies retreat. Their vehicles, now more affordable and compliant with EU standards, are flooding the market. The result: a strategic victory for European industry and a devastating blow to America's manufacturing icons. The balance of power in global manufacturing is shifting before our eyes. The trade war is no longer abstract, it's a direct threat to jobs, profits, and the future of US industry. For workers and families in Detroit, Seattle, and beyond, the consequences are becoming painfully real. The pain of this trade war is most acute far from corporate boardrooms, where the headlines rarely capture the true human cost. It's felt in the small towns and family businesses that supply America's industrial giants, places where a single factory can be the heartbeat of an entire community. When orders from Boeing or Ford dry up, small suppliers, machine shops, software firms, parts makers are the first to suffer, with little cushion to survive. For many, even a brief pause in production can threaten their very existence. A lost contract can mean layoffs, shuttered shifts, and a ripple effect through local economies, from restaurants to retail. The impact spreads quickly, touching every corner of these towns. For workers, it's not just numbers. It's the fear of missed mortgage payments, lost health insurance, and canceled family plans. The anxiety seeps into daily life, making every decision harder. These skilled employees, often generations deep in their trades, are now collateral damage in a global dispute they can't control. Their pride in their craft is matched only by their uncertainty about the future. The crisis exposes the fragility of specialized supply chains, revealing just how interconnected and vulnerable these networks truly are. For example, a Connecticut medical device maker loses its European market, and EU competitors quickly fill the gap, leaving little hope for recovery. This isn't just a temporary setback, it's a permanent loss of market position and trust, forcing painful restructuring across American industry. The effects can last for years, if not decades. The trade war's true cost is measured in lost livelihoods and broken communities, stories of resilience but also of dreams put on hold and futures left uncertain. As US industries reel, European competitors are seizing the moment. EU automakers like Volkswagen and BMW are protected by tariffs, allowing them to dominate their home market while US rivals are priced out. In aviation, Airbus is promoted as the tax-free, eco-friendly alternative, capitalizing on Boeing's sudden price disadvantage. The EU's strategy is deliberate heavy investment in R&D, electrification and sustainable tech, while the US focuses on tariffs. Shrinking US profits mean less money for innovation, while European firms surge ahead with government support. Global companies now see Europe as a more stable, reliable partner, shifting contracts and investment away from the US. Ironically, US tariffs meant to protect industry are making European firms more competitive and attractive. The long game, Europe is poised for growth, while American businesses face shrinking markets and uncertain futures. The US-EU trade war is shaking the global economy, prompting other nations to act. Canada has slapped new tariffs on US steel and aluminum, signaling its displeasure and solidarity with the EU. South Korea is preparing its own retaliation, targeting US agricultural products, LNG and aircraft, threatening another vital market for American exporters. Even Gulf countries are reconsidering long-term US energy contracts, wary of instability and seeking more predictable partners. The message: unilateral US tariffs erode trust and disrupt decades-old trade relationships. Instead of isolating rivals, America risks isolating itself, as countries consider forming new supply chains that bypass the US. The fallout: a coalition of nations could emerge, compounding economic damage and threatening America's central role in global trade. The world is watching, and the cost of US trade policy is mounting. With billions in jobs at stake, pressure is mounting for a diplomatic breakthrough. Industry lobbyists are pushing for urgent US-EU talks, with a high-stakes summit between President Trump and EU President von der Leyen set in Scotland. One proposal: both sides drop tariffs to 15%, with exemptions for sensitive products. A partial fix, but still painful for US industries. Political realities complicate compromise. The Trump administration's tough stance is central to its brand, and any concession risks backlash ahead of the 2026 midterms. The EU refuses to negotiate under duress, demanding the US drop tariffs first. Both sides are entrenched, making a quick deal unlikely. The likely outcome: a prolonged standoff with tariffs becoming the new normal and economic pain deepening. The window for peace is closing, and the cost of failure grows by the day. The trade war's unintended consequence: American companies are moving jobs and production overseas. Facing punishing tariffs, GM is expanding in Mexico to bypass EU barriers, while Ford shifts engine production to Turkey for European-bound vehicles. Boeing is exploring joint ventures in Europe, potentially relocating assembly to avoid tariffs, a move alarming US labor unions. The very policies meant to protect US jobs are driving them abroad, hollowing out American manufacturing. Once factories close and supply chains move, it's nearly impossible to bring them back. The loss isn't just immediate, it erodes skills, infrastructure, and the foundation of US industry. The short-term pain of tariffs could trigger a long-term decline in America's industrial base. The risk: a permanent loss of economic sovereignty and opportunity for American workers. Beyond lost sales and jobs, the trade war threatens America's innovative edge. Shrinking profits mean less investment in R&D, the engine of future breakthroughs in aviation, autos, and tech. Boeing and Detroit rely on today's profits to fund tomorrow's advances. Now, projects are delayed or canceled as resources dry up. Meanwhile, European and Asian rivals, backed by government support, press ahead in electrification and sustainable aviation. The EU's strategy targets America's most advanced sectors to reshape the global tech landscape in its favor. The danger U.S. trade policy, meant to secure an advantage, could sacrifice America's leadership in innovation for years to come. The stakes are generational. America's prosperity depends on staying ahead. The US-EU trade war has moved from rhetoric to real economic pain, with $66 billion in US exports blocked and iconic industries in crisis. The fallout is nationwide canceled orders, shrinking profits, job losses, and small businesses on the brink. European competitors are gaining ground, global supply chains are shifting, and new trade barriers are rising worldwide. The policies meant to protect US industry now threaten to undermine it, risking a long-term decline in manufacturing and innovation. Political divisions and looming elections make a quick resolution unlikely, leaving American workers and communities in limbo. The choices made now, in Washington, Brussels, and boardrooms, will shape America's industrial future for decades. The story is still unfolding and the stakes could not be higher. What path should American industry take in this new era of global trade? The horizon is uncertain and the world is watching. Subscribe to the channel Skytech-Lens for more updates. Thanks.